Sideshow Collectibles have an extensive catalog of X-Men statues and figurines. But in 2017, they finally tackled one of the most revered story arcs in Marvel Comics. Hello, I'm Gina, and this is my full review of the Dark Phoenix premium format statue by Sideshow Collectibles. Now, I have to begin by confessing that my appreciation for this statue has wavered over the last year. When she was first previewed to us at the end of 2015, I gravitated towards the portrait and the pose, but as the year waned on, I became uneasy about the base, and the color of her outfit seemed to be a brighter shade of red than what was first previewed to us. But now that I see her in hand, I'm really pleased with this statue. And to explain why, I'm going to discuss some background information, and then I'm going to move on to the regular portrait, the exclusive portrait, the body of the statue, the base, and then I'll conclude with my final thoughts. So with my X-Men t-shirt on and the cameras rolling, let's get started. Now, the Dark Phoenix is one of the most pivotal characters in the X-Men universe, and this statue portrays her plunging forward with her arms and hands clenched back, and there's a haunting expression swept over her face. Now, the design for this statue seems to be taken directly from the Dark Phoenix saga in the X-Men comics, issues number 129 to 138. In this storyline, Jean Grey has her tremendous psychic powers unleashed after being exposed by a solar flare, and this entity becomes known as the Phoenix. But after being manipulated by members of the Hellfire's Club, she's made to believe that her love, Cyclops, has been killed. And with this imagery too agonizing to bear, the Phoenix is transformed into the Dark Phoenix, filled with rage, wrath, and fury. It is that very transformation that this statue is trying to emulate. Jean Grey's metamorphosis from the restrained Phoenix to the uncontrollable Dark Phoenix, filled with madness. Now, the sculpt of this statue, done by William Harbottle, captures the power of the Dark Phoenix, but she's not depicted in a frenzied or hysterical state. Instead, she's sculpted with a very cold, calm, and composed anger, which makes her even more frightening in my opinion. Now, William Harbottle is really making his mark at Sideshow Collectibles as their senior sculptor, but he first cemented himself at Gentle Giant Studios, sculpting for their very popular Honey Trap and Sucker Punch lines. Now, in my opinion, he's taken his same sophistication and elegance that he's known for with his previous works and brought it to his latest statue. The lines are clean, the anatomy is spot on, and the pose comes off as very natural. Now, as happy as I am with the statue, there are a few tweaks I'd like to see made to the base. But before we get to the base, let's focus on the figure, and we'll begin with the portraits. So displayed here is the regular portrait, and it can be defined by the glaze over her eyes and the levitation in her hair. So let's just begin with the paint application. I'm a huge fan of the flesh tones that they've added to this portrait. I think it comes off as really organic, and in my opinion, there's no flaws whatsoever. And I also like how Sideshow didn't apply too much makeup to the portrait. I think that fits well with the story of the Dark Phoenix taking over Jean Grey's body. She's now more of an entity than a person. Now for the hair, there's definitely some gentle highlights added, with the top of the head being a bit brighter and her ends having a more darker brunette color. So for the sculpt of the regular portrait, in my opinion, for me, this is a fairly accurate portrayal of Jean Grey. This is not a face of a teenager or a 21-year-old. This looks like a senior member of the X-Men team. So I'm really happy with the sculpt of the face. But the real showstopper of the regular portrait has to be the sculpted hair. Every strand is individually sculpted, levitating upwards, and it just looks so beautiful. Now, even though I'm very pleased with the regular portrait, it's not my favorite portrait that comes with the statue, and I'll explain why next. So when I first unboxed the statue, I tried the regular portrait on first. But then when I had placed the exclusive portrait on the statue, as shown here, I knew instantly that this was my favorite portrait. You know, this has the same great flesh tones and paint application as the regular portrait. The only difference, of course, is that, the hair has less volume and it's sculpted sort of to the side, and obviously her eyes are painted in. But wow, what a difference her eyes make to the statue. In my opinion, it gives the statue a much more ominous presence. So, with the previous portrait, I think the hair is sculpted far more superior. But with the eyes here painted in with the exclusive portrait, for me, it just completes the statue. So that's why this is my favorite portrait. Now, next I'm going to give you guys some sort of comparison shots of the regular portrait and the exclusive portrait side by side. So you can decide which portrait you prefer, or maybe you like them equally. And after that, we're going to be discussing the body of the statue. Now, Sideshow Collectibles have produced many of their previous X-Men pieces with mixed media, but in recent years they seem to be moving in the direction of fully sculpted costumes for their characters. Now, I'm a fan of both fully sculpted or mixed media as long as it's executed well. And in this case, for this statue, I think the sculpt is done tremendously well. As the Dark Phoenix is plunging forward, you can see every crease, every tug and every pull of her costume. Now, I love how her gloves and her boots are just not painted on, but they're fully sculpted as well. And they have the exact same attention to detail that her costume has. You can see the sort of sculpted bunching of the materials at her elbows and at the back of her knees, which just comes across really well done. Now let's focus on the Phoenix symbol on the upper torso of her body. I think it's fairly accurate to the comics and perfectly placed, but what's even more notable is how the edges of the emblem are etched into the body, which I think is a pretty stylish touch. Now the sash, sculpted across her midsection, is a great enhancement to her outfit, and you have the ends sort of flowing right behind. Now we've seen this effect before on other statues, but what makes this sash original is how the ends seem to flow or encircle around her forearm and hand. Now, in contrast to her glossy gloves and boots, the body outfit is painted of a matte red color, and it has this rose pinkish undertones. And that's my first very minor gripe about the statue. I wish that the red was of a much more darker tone. I think that would have been more truthful to the comics, and I think a darker red would have given the costume a much more striking contrast against the gold emblem on her chest. I also wish that Sideshow had added a gold band around her neck. I think that would have allowed for a much more smoother transition from her neck to her body. But those are my only very small issues with the body of the statue. Other than that, I'm super pleased. And in fact, I think it outshines the base. And speaking of the base, let's talk about that next. The base of the statue depicts the flames of the Dark Phoenix engulfing Jean Grey. And at the side we have the wings of the bird, at the front the head of the beak, and it sits upon a very subdued gray platform. So ever since the statue was released, collectors have had a bone of contention with the base. And I have to say that I agree, because the base is far from perfect. But let me just begin with what I do like about the base. The Phoenix bird is constructed out of translucent resin, and the tips of the flames are painted this darker red. I think that this fiery effect comes off well, and in person it gives off a very luminous appearance. But unfortunately, that's all that the base has to offer. In my opinion, I find it very one-dimensional. I think there's just a bit more that Sideshow could have added to the base to give a better representation of the Dark Phoenix transformation. I do like how the flames wrap around her leg, but considering how low the base is, I think we're left wanting more flames or higher flames. So overall, I think I can best describe the base as well constructed, but not living up to its full potential. So in summary, I think what we have here is a beautifully sculpted portrait and body, resting upon a very average or subdued base. And as a consequence, I think that leaves the figure as the true star of the statue. Now, perhaps that's exactly what Sideshow intended, or maybe they were confined by the Marvel licensors. Either way, I think that the near-perfect figure outshines the flaws of the base. And I think that this statue makes a great addition to any X-Men collection. In my humble opinion, I think that the Dark Phoenix premium format statue continues Sideshow Collectibles' tradition of great female sculpts. Now, that's just my perspective, and I urge you to watch other YouTube videos on this statue and hear what other collectors have to say about this piece. Now, I think by this time I've spoke long enough, and I've said everything I had to say about this statue. So I want to thank you for watching this video, and I hope you enjoyed. Take care.